Welcome in, everybody. This is Basketball by Association, where we associate ourselves with basketball in a very basketball way. My name is Arky Shea. That is Joel C. Cordez with a Z at the end. Most of you guys have been misspelling it and mispronouncing it this whole time. Silly rabbits. Joel, we're at the All-Star break, which means we are exactly halfway through the season for the NBA. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I've been called Cortez.
Oh, I like Cortez.
My nickname in high school was the Conquistador because no one would pronounce it correctly, and they just went with the Spanish Conquistador. But no, it's Cortez. You have been mispronouncing it purposely wrong for all these years. That's fine. That's fine. I just want you to know that you and I are repping the, 94, 95 NBA Finals with the Knicks and the Rockets right here.
Oh, yeah, that worked out well for my Knicks.
I was going to let you admit that, but...
Yeah. Hey, listen.
Hakeem the Dream went to work.
No one remembers that series for anything other than one thing, so it's okay. Like, no one ever goes back and it's like, hey, man, what happened in the 95 NBA Finals? Well... Bob Costas came on TV. And that's all you really sort of need to know. Oh, Jay, sorry.
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth?
Life is something but no double homicide talk here on this podcast unless something breaks during the show. Joel, dude, I'm sorry.
Let's name an episode. Let's do that real quick. People. Let's get ourselves out of this right now.
You just shouldn't kill people. That's all I think. You know,
I
am a simple man.
There's two players in NBA history who have logged 135 career playoff games. And we are episode 135. One of them, I knew you would not want to name an episode after because, again, you're Knicks. But there's a whole lot of other people around the league who would not want to name an episode for this player. So we're not going to get a Bruce Bowen episode, even though the delicious irony, I would love to name a Bruce Bowen episode. But the other guy, I'll have you guess, and you should be able to get it. He is a current player. Okay. The final clue will give it away, but I'm going to give you the final clue anyway.
All right, Stop Joel, me I'm going to close my eyes while I think about this. I don't know if you can see it on the... I'm closing my eyes to try to think of this. Here we go. Concentration mode locked in.
5-time All-Star. 2-time NBA champ. He was on the 2011-12 All-Rookie team. A 2-time Finals MVP. He was the All-Star MVP in 2019-20. 5-time All-NBA player. 7-time All-Defensive player. 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. He is on the NBA 75th anniversary team. And the two final clues that should give it away. Number one, he's a franchise teammate of Bruce Bowen, though he never actually played with Bowen, to my knowledge. And one of his nicknames, among a few, is Fun Guy, because he's a fun guy.
Yeah, is that Kawhi?
It's the Claw.
That's what I was doing the claw.
Yeah.
If you're just listening on the podcast visually, I was doing a claw. We got a Kawhi Leonard episode. That dude is so fun to listen to, man. Love everything about that guy.
Kawhi Leonard is one of my favorite players of the last 15 years. I will say this. Peak Kawhi is the most disruptive defender I've ever seen. And I put that ahead of Scottie Pippen. I put that ahead of any of the great shot blockers, great defenders. Kawhi Leonard is the most disruptive individual defender at his peak that I've ever seen.
More so than Allen Iverson?
Iverson is one of the most disruptive offensive players I've ever seen.
There we go.
For better and worse. For better and worse.
We're not going to slander AI, even though it was a slight joke.
No,
AI, not particularly known for defense. All right, Joel. So the All-Star game, whatever. So that's a thing, right? So you have all your celebrity games, and you have your dunk contests and the 3-pointers and stuff. That's fine. The game.
All that's yet to happen and will be dated by the time we really put this out anyway.
Me, all that stuff's just window dressing, right?
Perfect.
It's fine for the fans. It's wonderful to be able to sort of enjoy some of it without, having too much money lost by betting Jason Tatum for the 3-point contest, which I wouldn't recommend, but at least he's a name that's going to be out there doing it.
Right.
Um,
You're not going to bet on Mac McClung for the dunk contest because we're really dipping far in our bag when McClung's not even an everyday player, much less everyday roster player.
We say this all the time, and I don't want to. This isn't another get into this thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be short, one sentence or less for you. Okay. Should the dunk contest go away forever or go away for a while?
Go away until you get buy-in from big names to do it.
Okay. All right. No more. We'll discuss that for some other time. But, that's been, Mac McClung.
Or just get Jose Alvarado to do it against himself, because Alvarado already stole the show for the Rising Stars game, which we won't talk about. But
let me ask this real quick. What if you switch the order of the dunk contest and the 3-point contest? People tend to be more interested in just have a couple years where the dunk contest isn't the thing you end with, so maybe you still have it, you still get to have that around, but the skills challenge is first, then you do the dunk contest, and then you bring in, because it's a shooters league anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
People, and you're getting more stars technically on the 3-point contest.
If you can't get the big names to go to the dunk contest, then really mix it up and bring in a college player who's really well known as a dunker. Bring in an international guy if you can get the insurance to work out. Bring in an international guy and add that. Bring in a celebrity dunker because they're out there, or a street ball dunker.
Mascot.
Yeah, a street ball dunker, something, and maybe you have 2 NBA players and you have 2 non-NBA challengers. And that at least adds a different flair to it rather than end of the bench guys every year. And it's we might get 2 cool dunks out of it that we'll talk about, but the rest of it just has lost the luster. Either get the superstars back or let's really lean into getting random with it. And then I like your idea, especially put the dunk contest as the the opening appetizer for one of the evenings instead of a main event, because it's not a main event anymore.
Yeah, and I do think honestly that more people would be interested if the people that are participating in it are actually super excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to tell you what Mac McClung thinks. I'm just going to say that I don't think he was probably the most pumped to get the news that he was invited, because he was probably like, I'm not top 4 on this team to think about much.
Right.
Okay, so let's get to a couple of things for going forward for this season. Before we start predicting a couple of things this NBA season going forward, I want to do one thing. First, since we are, Joel, as I mentioned, officially one halfway exactly through the season. Each team has played 41 games exactly.
No.
I want to take a look real quick at where the betting odds are for a few of the awards at the end.
Did you know that I'm just looking at the standings right now. Most teams are almost to 60 games at this point, which is always so funny when it's the All-Star break is the halfway point. It's we only got 22 games left to go here, guys.
Yeah, we might
25 for a few.
If the NBA gets smart and says let's start around Christmas, then we start getting actually Roman calendar accurate with that.
You know what? This is just going to be a tangent show since we're just throwing out ideas.
Yeah,
you know what would kind of make sense to fix some of that is if we treat it like baseball and you just play a series against that team and you keep it at home. And I know this would kind of mess maybe with ticket sales, but if I'm going to see the Cavaliers 4 times during the year, I see them 3 games in a row at home, and I play 1 game away against them, and then we reverse it the following year. And now we can play 3 nights in a row, 4 nights in a row, because you don't have the travel issue screwing everything up. And you really could condense the season down like baseball gets away with it. And that's because they've reduced their travel. I know the game's a little bit different, but you could do it.
Yeah, you can do it. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at some of the odds, current betting odds. Now, we told you when we started at the beginning of the season who would win the majority of these high-end awards. We'll see what we think now.
We'll see if we remember who we picked.
Joel, the NBA MVP awards odds list currently have Nikola Jokic as the favorite to win at minus 135. That would make him a 3-time in a rower, which this NBA does not get anymore, which would be interesting. Behind him is Joel Embiid at plus 350, Giannis at plus 650, Luka plus 750, and then Jason Tatum plus 1,300. LeBron James and John Morant are both plus 5,000 if you want, by the way. So, Joe, Nikola Jokic isn't the sexiest name, but he puts up the sexiest numbers each and that night, and he just produces, and it's hard not to just look at the numbers flat out and say, why wouldn't you think like he's just as good as last year and the year before, better? You know, like why would you not think the numbers
team is in first place. His team is in first place, whereas Luka's is in sixth. You know, it's a big deal. You can make the Jason Tatum argument that his team is the best in the East and has the better record even than Denver, but arguably Jason Tatum has more help than Nikola Jokic does, and the Celtics can survive a Jason Tatum absence, not well, but better than a Nikola Jokic absence. If Jokic is gone, that's a completely different team and not a very good one. So I would say this for Jokic. He has proven absolutely capable of being a regular season MVP, and that's really what the award is about. I think the fact that he'd be a 3-time in a row guy probably diminishes his chances, even though he's got the odds-on favorite. Yeah. And I would love to see in the Jokic case, like, oh, we're going to give him the award. Let's wait to see if he actually gets the Nuggets to the NBA Finals. Like, we are at that point now where you've shown me all these things. It's impressive. I'm not trying to take away any shine from it.
They've never been this good, this deep under Jokic. Like, they're 5 games up right now. Like they are clearly the class of the West right now.
Since this is going to be a stream of consciousness type of episode and some tangents, it leads to a question I was meaning to ask you one of these episodes. You've perennially been picking the Nuggets over the last couple of years to represent the West. This was the first year that you really didn't, but they're in first. Like you said, they're 5 games up. They've backed it up despite some injuries, despite some rust on Jamal Murray. But they do look really good. I wish they would have made maybe one more deal at the deadline, and they're probably not going to be a buyout candidate place because Denver just isn't that sexy for whatever that reason, and guys want to go to the Clippers or the Suns or the Heat or whatever, the usuals. Do you think this is the year that the Nuggets, based on what you're seeing in the rest of the Western Conference, is this the year that they finally can crawl out alive? I'm not asking about whether they win the title or not, but can they rep the West in the finals despite being number 1?
Man, I think this is the year. I think this is shaping up to be the year if they're going to be able to do it. The West is down, man. What we thought the Clippers were going to be, what we thought the Suns were going to. Now the Suns can still round into form and be really, really elite, right?
I feel like the Clippers good and the Lakers maybe could too. But.
Yeah, the Mavericks, like we still like Kyrie and Luka, like do they get to play more than 4 minutes together at some point? Like who knows what that's going to look like? Probably not going to be.
Will they get 16 games together before Kyrie demands a trade to Siberia?
Will they get 16 a game before the end of the season? Like, I have no idea. The Pelicans, you deal with Zion just not being able to be the guy threat ever again. They're not a threat.
They're not.
The Warriors do concern me some just because they've done it before. They've been through there, and we always talk about teams that need to break through. They had to have the heartbreak, and Denver's had that heartbreak.
Yeah,
Denver's had the heartbreak. Denver has been knocking on the door over and over and over again. So, Joel, I think if there's going to be a year, I think you look at this year being the Denver year to be able to push through. Like this shaping up to be the best year for them to be the class of the West, depending, of course, what Phoenix says. But this has to be their year. This has to be it. Because if they don't do it this year, I don't know when they're going to do it, to be honest.
Yeah, Memphis gets scary, and somebody else will pop up. Maybe the Pelicans will be ready next year, what have you, some of these other all-star laden teams. My feeling on the Nuggets is if they can make it to the Western Conference Finals and they can face somebody other than the Grizzlies in the conference finals, then I like Denver's chances at this point. Yeah. I'm not sold on them against a Grizzlies team that is going to mess everything up and just uglify the game as much as they possibly can.
I like that phrase.
I'm not sure that Denver has the answers to something like that. Like they can win some games when it's ugly. It's not that Jokic is soft, and it's not that the offense has to be beautiful. Like they'll dump it inside and play bully ball with Jokic a little bit. But if the shooters are not hitting and the game never finds a rhythm, yeah, they'll win a couple, but that's the type of series that Memphis can win a series like that. I look at the Grizzlies like I would with the Miami Heat at this point. When the Heat are at their best, they mess you up, and they wait for those mistakes, and they have enough talent to capitalize, but they don't have to have all the top end talent. And to tie into the Heat a little bit more, I see the Warriors right now the same way that we saw the Heat. Was it last year? No, it was 2 years ago, where we kept saying, man, watch out for Miami. But we kind of kept saying it because we felt like we had to, because Miami always proves us wrong. And so we were worried about Miami because we should be worried about Miami theoretically. And then they got into the playoffs and were just, ran over by the Bucks. Maybe that was last year. I'm forgetting. But like they just got run over. And it's like, all right, they're a shadow of themselves. They were on their pedigree. And right now with the Warriors, all right, 29-29, it was fine to give you guys the benefit of the doubt when you were 500 20 games ago. Not really anymore. Like, you're not a threat until otherwise noted. I'd be more scared about the Clippers, more scared about the Suns on paper. I honestly think, like, you get into, if the Lakers round into form, you could have a tough series that you don't want to have to deal with against the Lakers team if they can make it into the actual playoffs.
I think that's a fair way to put it. That it could be tougher than what you're wanting it to be. Sort of
even as a 1-8 seed. If I'm Denver and I suddenly have to play the Lakers in the first round, like I'm not loving that. Like that's
no. But Anthony Davis is never going to play again, so so you'll never have to deal with that again. That's fine. Okay, I want to get to a couple more of these odds real quick, but I just want to say just briefly that I don't appreciate your disrespect of the Kings right now. That's all.
We've talked about them. They're not a threat yet. They're a good team. They're a good regular season team. They're not a playoff threat until they prove something, and they haven't had that chance to do that. So it's not disrespectful to them. It just is the way it goes.
It is. It's disrespectful. Okay. It's disrespectful. The Kings have gotten way more talk on this podcast this year than they've ever gotten. I think
we're making up for lost time. We're making up for lost time.
Yeah. The Rookie of the Year odds has Paolo Banchero as the odds-on favorite, -1,000. Huge odds to be able to win that. The next guy is Benedict Mathurin, who's +600. Jaden Ivey +3,300, alongside my guy Walker Kessler, who is +3,300 as well. This is Paolo's award to win right now, right?
It has to be. The only things that could change is if Kessler starts getting starters minutes every night. He has been moved into the starting lineup.
He has.
But based on
Kessler has been really, really, really earning his minutes.
And when you watch the Jazz, and I know not a lot of people do of their own volition, but if you do watch Jazz games because they're playing your favorite team, Kessler's legit. He's the real deal. He's going to be a career starter. I don't necessarily see a multi-time All-Star, but I see a Steven Adams clone in all the best ways. Like, this is
better hair.
Tough, better hair now. Until rookie Steven Adams didn't have the tattoos in the hair, and then all of a sudden went to caveman Steven Adams. We'll see if Kessler follows suit. But like, which reminds me of like Chris Kaman, rookie Chris Kaman versus end of career Chris Kaman was just. But Kessler looks like a solid career starter who's going to be very helpful defensively, not going to hurt you on the offensive end. I don't know if he'll have any all-star games in his future, but maybe he does. Mathurin is kind of the same way. Ben Mathurin's been coming off the bench, doing good things, but he's kind of been one-dimensional as a scorer. Like, he's a legit NBA scorer. There's nothing else around it. He doesn't really fill up any other stats, which I think is part of why the Pacers found that role for him. Yeah. And we're going to let him grow into the other stuff.
Yeah. And so by the way, when you're talking about like trying to pick somebody to be the Rookie of the Year or something, that's the big thing you sort of look for anyway. Like, most people don't pay attention to the Rookie of the Year stuff, except for it's like, hey, who's scoring the most for the most part, right? Like, no one cares about your blocks per 48 or something like that. They just sort of care about what you're putting up offensively. And that's why he's up there for in the running for it. It's also why Paolo's up there too.
Well, yeah. And Mathurin is getting more minutes, and he's gotten some starts along the way due to injuries in Indiana. And if the season is lost and they kind of drop out of the playoff race for good, which looks like it probably will happen, you'll probably see Matherin begin to start, and some of those numbers might get inflated more. So he's got an outside shot, just like Kessler does. Jaden Ivey has zero chance. There is zero chance of that happening. Like, the numbers just haven't been there. Detroit is completely off of everybody's radar. Ivey looks like a solid player, but he's got a lot of room to grow. So I agree. This is Banchero's. It's Banchero's because not only was he the top pick, but he's gotten starters minutes all year.
He's averaging 35 minutes a game. He's getting 20 points a game. Like, he just
fills
goes
the
in there.
Stat sheet in other categories too, besides just scoring.
Yeah, he just goes in and quietly is able to put in and work, put in a lot of work in Orlando. No one sort of pays attention. He just puts up numbers. Next thing you know, they're 50 games in the season, and he's like, wow, he's averaging like 20 points a game. Like, okay, that's nothing wrong with that at all.
I love the young core they have and the fact that they're going to get yet another young player to put in there. We've said this about the Magic in the past, and then the core never came together. But I like the collection of guys that they have, from Jalen Suggs and Markelle Fultz and Franz Wagner a lot. I think Wendell Carter Jr. and Ball, even Mo Wagner. Like, there's a lot of different Chuma Akiki. They've got a lot of different options on that front line. I think Jonathan Isaac will probably get moved this offseason. But there's just a lot of different guys that could grow around Banchero. It's just a matter of who actually does. But Orlando's rebuild makes a lot more sense than some of the other teams that have attempted rebuilds at this point. But you just got to see it pan out.
The Sixth Man of the Year awards right now is tied. Malcolm Brogdon and Russell Westbrook both plus 160 to win that award. Let me also mention that right behind them is Tyrese Maxey at plus 500 and Norman Powell plus 650. Joel, you're shaking your head already. What's up?
I can give the Sixth Man of the Year award to a player who was so good in his role he got traded and bought out.
Yeah, you can.
No, I can't. That's ridiculous. That's the absolute LA big market bias. I understand Russ's numbers. Like, if you did not realize it was Russell Westbrook and there was no baggage or preconceived notion, and you just said player X is averaging 15 points, 7 assists, 7 boards off the bench, or whatever it is, like, and it's been respectable, and you just gave me those numbers, and you didn't mention on-off numbers, you didn't mention shooting percentages and all that stuff, you would look at that and go, oh, yeah, no, that's a high-impact player off the bench. So I get that part of it. And like I said, I think his role now is as a sixth man, and he can be successful with that. But I can't give that to a guy, like I said, who's so valuable his team had to get him out of there. So no, it's not for Russ. I don't like a lot of the other names. I guess Tyrese Maxey makes a lot of sense to me. I like his game. I like the fact that Philly's been very good, that their guards have all stepped up. Like, James Harden has found his role. He's leading the league in assists. Nobody's talking about that, but like,
we talk about it all the time with him. No one ever wants to talk about that with him, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, oh, he's such a selfish player. It's like, no, dude is top 3 in assists every single year. Mm-hmm. I get he can have tunnel vision and get selfish on a possession-by-possession basis, but overall, no. Like, he is a distributor and a very good one at that, and Philly needed that. DeAnthony Melton has, like, become a really valuable two-way player and a lead defensive guy for the Sixers. So, yeah, I could give it to Maxey. Norman Powell, he's been hurt too much this year for me to give that award to him. I love Powell. He's been a fantasy stalwart for me. He fills it up with points and threes and very valuable for what the Clippers need. But so who is there was one other guy in there that I didn't touch on. It said Maxey.
Brogdon.
Oh, yeah, Brogdon. Brogdon's numbers are really good for Boston. He's playing starters minutes, but it's off the bench. They're too, like, Brogdon has missed a ton of games this year, though. It's hard because we don't really have, like, one guy on a team who really is standing out.
Sixth man and standing out as the sixth man consistently. Yeah. We
know, because
it's a little wonky.
Because of injuries, guys have been put into that starting lineup, or vice versa, or they've missed too much time in that role. Like, and then some of it, like, we just go based off numbers. Is there really more of an impactful second unit player than Jose Alvarado, for example? And it's not just that I'm high on the performance the other night. Like, there are certain guys who come off of certain benches and the numbers may not be there, but they literally change the game and they keep their team afloat, and they even bring a different dynamic that you don't get otherwise because they're all over the place. I think about when Marcus Smart was coming off the bench for Boston. Josh Hart's been coming off the bench for New York, and I know it's too early. He's not even in the running because he was a starter in Portland. He might wind up being a starter in New York long-term as they go. I think that would make the most sense. But, like, Hart's been killing it, at least box score-wise. He's been killing it since he came to New York in that second unit.
Let's run through these last two ones I wanted to mention real quick. Defensive Player of the Year odds right now have Jaren Jackson as the strong favorite, minus 250. I think that's very well deserved at this point. Nick Claxton and Bam Adebayo are both at plus 650. Jaren Jackson Jr., I don't think it's somewhat. You may have brought him up in the preseason stuff. I think you did, in fact, bring him in the preseason. I did not. So you obviously saw a year like this coming from someone like him, and he has had a very good 2022-23.
He's on a team that everybody defends. You don't play if you don't defend on that Grizzlies team. So it helps a guy like that not having to clean up so many mistakes of other people. It's one of the big reasons why, like, Rudy Gobert was a defensive player of the year in Utah multi-time, because everybody defended all the time for those Utah teams. Even somebody like Bojan Bogdanovic had to defend. Rudy Gobert goes to a Minnesota team where only some of the guys defend, and other people defend just some of the time. And suddenly Gobert goes from averaging 3+ blocks a game to 1.3 a game. And it's still very good defensively, but you don't see the same thing because he's having to clean up a lot. He's off balance. Jaren Jackson is a guy that gets you the block totals like a Miles Turner does, but he'll get you some steals as well. Jackson's problem is that he is a foul machine.
Sure.
He leads the league in fouls. He's very over aggressive at times. But I do think this is probably his year to get the award. It's unfair to Miles Turner that he's missed out as many times as he has. But I also think it's unfair how the league seems to only prioritize blocks for defensive players of the year. Marcus Smart finally got one.
Right. Like, this is a big man award for the most part, right? Like, this just has turned into a big man award for a long, long time. And it wasn't yet till Marcus Smart, though, last year, who actually, got it at a guard spot.
And that's where somebody like OG Anunoby should be in the conversation, averaging over 2 steals a game and almost a block per game. He doesn't have all the defensive help that Jackson does. D'Anthony Melton in Philly.
Let me just say that OG Anunoby is at plus 8,000 right now.
Yeah, D'Anthony Melton is 4th in the league in steals, but averaging half a block a game. And when he's gotten minutes, his block numbers are really up. Herb Jones was in the conversation for a while, but is out. It is a big man award, and I guess there's no way around that. So
I don't know.
For me, it is Jaren Jackson.
Like, I just don't get why. Like, blocks are a great, sexy number. I get it, right? But, like, it's not like someone's averaging 11 blocks a game. Like, it's like, if it's just ridiculous numbers.
Triple J is 3 blocks a game and a steal per game, and for that reason alone, I can look at that and go, okay, to average over a steal per game, that's pretty solid even for a guard. Yeah. So for you to do that from a big man spot and to think, hey, if you would foul just a little bit less, these block and steal numbers could be inflated even more because you'd be on the floor that much more often. Like, he only plays 27 minutes a game. So
it's kind of wild, isn't it?
Yeah, like, let's give it to him. I am not a big fan. Like, Brook Lopez has been in this number, and it's like, it's a great story considering what Lopez was at the beginning of his career to where he is now, and the fact that he's anchoring the Bucks defense and it's 2.5 blocks a game. And Lopez is very, very good at verticality, but I never liked it when it's like, we're going to give defensive player of the year to Roy Hibbert. And it's like, why? Because Roy Hibbert is tall and knows how to clog up the lane. Like, he's not that good. And it's my same feeling about Lopez. Like, he's valuable in the scheme of their defense. He's not that good. Jaren Jackson, I can put on any team and know that he's going to be a weak side monster shot blocker and a good straight up shot blocker, as well as a guy who gets me those steals if he can just stay on the floor.
No one gets in the way like Roy Hibbert. No one just stands in the way like that guy. Okay, final one that we'll get to. One last thing I wanted to get to before we end this show. This is the Coach of the Year. Do you want to take a guess at who the favorite is right now for Coach of the Year? Their team leads one of the conferences.
Is it Missoula from Boston then?
It's Joe Mazzulla right now.
Okay.
Joe Mazzulla is plus 200. Willie Green's plus 300, which is, for me, still a little surprising. I think that's still off the heels of what this team we thought was going to be at the beginning. It was at the beginning of the year for the girth stretch, but they have come back to earth in a hard way since, they're losing all kinds of bodies, right? Like,
where's Taylor Jenkins? Is he ahead of Mike Malone or behind
my guy
him?
Taylor Jenkins is next at plus 500. Okay. Jacques Vaughn is plus 500 as well, and Will Hardy plus 650. Man, Mike Malone's just never going to get any respect, is he? He's never going to get. No one wants to vote for anybody that is above sea level very largely, I guess.
He's been in Denver too long that everybody's forgotten about him, and he's paired with Jokic, and they're like, well, Malone might be a decent coach, but you got Jokic, and I mean, all of those other coaches have stars too, but.
Listen, you're 5 games up in the West right now. That's either because of you or the guy who's the MVP. You couldn't have done anything.
I will say this on Joe Mazzulla, and we've talked about him before. It both helps and hurts his candidacy about what happened with the Ime Udoka saga, because this was a tough situation last minute to come in. Granted, you were an assistant last year, so you had some familiarity and respect, but to come in last minute and to keep that team in first place, that is impressive. But on the other hand, you go, oh, wait a minute. Udoka got coach of the year, and then some other guy can just come in and get the same results. Is it really the coach, or is it?
Can you take away last year's coach of the year? Can you do that?
That they figured it out. Like, to me, I'd be much more inclined to give Mazzulla coach of the year next year. If he can get Boston in first again, and this is a sustainable thing, and it's not just a residual effect over where they were at last year, then I'm much more inclined. But this year, I would rather have Jenkins or Mike Brown in Sacramento, Mike Malone. I mean, a lot of the Western Conference guys, to me, I'd be looking at more than the East. Although you could make
you don't want to give it to a coach of a team that's on the current 3-game win streak in the East to go into the All-Star break that happens to be in the number 1 media market in the country. I'm not naming names. I'm just giving you statistics. That's all.
Hey, if Tibbs can get the Knicks into the top 3, number 3 or 4 by the end of the season, sure, absolutely. But to me, if Cleveland's up there, JB Bickerstaff has to be in the mix for it. Doc Rivers should never get a coach of the year again, no matter what happens, until he wins another championship. Like, it's just the way it is. Even Budenholzer, I feel like, is kind of played out as far as that. So I like the names you mentioned. Jacques Vaughn obviously is not going to be in that mix anymore, but
I can't believe Mike Malone's so far down the list. Like,
it's a little crazy.
Like, the team's head and shoulders above everybody right now in the West.
And I mean, realistically, and I can never remember his name, so I'm going to go click on it right now and hope that NBA.com has it. Mark Dageneau. The fact that the Oklahoma City Thunder are like 500 and are competitive every single night, to me, that's more impressive than Doc Rivers got his team to 3rd place again. Like, when you talk about the coaching jobs and what it takes to get certain teams to certain spots, like, Dageneau's probably bottom 5 in coach of the year, but probably should be top 7 as far as the job he's actually done with what he's got. But it's just the nature of the beast,
Okay. We got a few minutes left. By the way, if you're going to go play some money, I'd go place a few dollars right now on Mike Malone. They're going to be there at the end of the year. Go ahead and get you some long odds right now. Denver's not going anywhere. Okay, so we found out the finalist for the NBA Hall of Fame, or the Basketball Hall of Fame, that will be coming up. And Joel, I'm going to run through a few of these real quick and just ask you, do you know who they are? Pau Gasol. Have you heard of Pau Gasol? Is it Paul? Did they misspell? They miswrote it. There's a Paul Gasol. Right there. It's Paul Gasol.
I still watch YouTube videos where like 20-something kids are, doing their NBA breakdown or whatever, and somebody invariable will go Paul, and it has to be corrected like on air.
This class is pretty loaded.
This class is loaded. It makes me feel really old because now we're at that point where it's like, I remember when these guys came in as rookies, and it wasn't just like when I was a kid, they came in as rookies like when I was in college and got to see them play their whole career. Gasol was a class act. I mean, that's not the reason he's in the Hall of Fame just because he was a good dude, but he was put into a lot of difficult situations, both coming into the Grizzlies, he was part of the move to Memphis and ingratiated himself there, and they had some good teams. To be put onto that Lakers team with Kobe and the pressure that was there, but to be the yin to Kobe's yang, and it really was like you had this very calm, very professional, he was going to show up and do his job, so Kobe respected the heck out of him.
Yeah.
But he was also just even keel all the time, and that allowed Kobe to be kind of the alpha guy that he didn't really get with Shaq, where you had that budding nature. Like, they were really good teammates, and I don't think they get enough credit, honestly. Like, the duo of those two, we always talk about Shaq and Kobe, but Kobe and Gasol was really, really effective, even though they maybe didn't have the supporting cast that some of the really early Lakers teams did with Kobe.
And he was good as soon as he got in the league. He was a rookie of the year when he came in.
Some of it's diminished. Some of it's diminished by the fact that he went, and bounced around a little bit, then Chicago, San Antonio, what have you, and was in decline for a while. But
Shaq went on like a dozen teams where he was like 400 pounds when he would show up to training camp. Like, like no one remembers Phoenix, Shaquille or Boston Shaquille or anything. Everyone just sort of remembers Orlando when he was a freak, and Los Angeles when he blossomed into this unstoppable force.
Yeah, the most dominant player of that time period. Yep.
Yeah. Becky Hammond is on this list. 6-time WNBA All-Star. Of course, we most recently hear her name every offseason getting interviewed for potential NBA gigs. Gene Katie, who is a 7-time Big Ten Coach of the Year, longtime coach of the Purdue Boilermakers. Dirk Nowitzki. Dirk Nowitzki. 14-time All-Star. I didn't know it was that many. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
He's that's nuts. 06 and 07 MVP, 2011 NBA champion. That 2011 team was never supposed to win the championship.
One of my favorite stories and favorite playoff runs to watch ever. One of my favorite finals to watch too.
Yeah. Mark Cuban, there's a story going around, tells this story about after the championship. They won it I think they won it in Miami. Is that right? I think they won that.
I think so, yeah.
They won the clinching game was in Miami. And he said that there was like this bottle of champagne Dirk wanted to get. It was like $14,000 or something like that. And Dirk said, "Hey, get that." And Mark's like, "For real? Do you think it's worth it?" He's like, "Yeah, let's get it. We just won the title, right?" So 10 minutes go by, 15 minutes go by, 20 minutes go by. Dirk's like, "Where's that champagne?" A server comes over to Mark Cuban, and Mark says, "Sir, your card's been declined." So he calls American Express, and he says, tries to verify him, and then American Express says, "Hey, how do we know it's you?" And Mark Cuban says, "Are you kidding me right now? Turn on the TV. Look, we're in Miami right now. Do you know what just happened?" And then a couple more minutes later, they get him refused, and they get the big bottle of champagne for winning that. All because Dirk Nowitzki wanted a huge bottle.
That'd be even funnier if he called and the credit card company's like, "We have no idea what you're talking about." It was just the waiter messing with him because he's a Heat fan. It's like, I'm not getting freaking champagne to you.
No, you'll get some Dasani and you'll like it. How's that? Tony Parker, 6-time All-Star, 4-time champion, was the 07 Finals MVP. I think that's a no-brainer too. Sort of. Now these are the finalists. They haven't been. They still have to be voted on to be able to be inducted. Greg Popovich, I'm not sure how he gets in. He's a 5-time NBA champion. Do you think he hangs it up this year?
I think he should.
I think he should. But do you think he does?
No. I think he
does it. Still hangs on?
I think he does it for 2 more years.
Really?
I think we get 2 more years of Pop. Yep. I get the sense that he probably doesn't know what to do next. That he's there, I don't want to speculate and play armchair psychologist, but his wife passed away, a couple of years ago, and he seems to be like at home and in this situation, and he's got a purpose. And I don't know if he would have that same, purpose. I think it's one of the reasons why Jerry Sloan hung on so long in Utah under similar circumstances.
Sure.
Like, that's your life, and that's probably your safe space, and that's what gives you a reason to wake up in the morning too. So
he's
I think
74.
we get 2 more years. Yeah.
He's 74. He's already comfortably ahead as the number 1 most wins of all time as a head coach in the NBA. Yeah, maybe it's right. Maybe he's just sort of afraid that, what am I else going to do with it? Like, what is San Antonio going to do? Kick him out? like
that would be where, I mean, keep him as an assistant for as long as or put him in the front office.
But
and
like I
have
don't
him
think
there.
he would want to. I don't know. He doesn't.
Can he handle
strike me as
not
the guy that
having the
would wanna do that.
power and not having the control? That's a big question too.
Yeah.
He couldn't when he was in the front office and he ousted Bob Hill back in the day and made himself coach. So.
And last one of note, there are a few more other ones. 13-time NBA All-Star, 3-time NBA champion, in the 06 Finals MVP, Mr. I misspelled my first name, Dwayne Wade.
Mm-hmm.
Dwayne Wade was one of the, I think, most. I feel like this is fair to say. I think he's really gone underappreciated as far as how dominant for how long he was, because I don't think he was even though his nickname was Flash, like he wasn't as flashy. Like he was in there in a time where like LeBron was getting all the highlight.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like no one wanted to sort of be like Dwayne Wade he never won the league MVP, right?
No, Kobe, no. Vince Carter, Shaq. There was all those other guys of the mid-aughts and
that just overshadowed him in that sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
But all he did was get the All-Star games. All he did was lead his team to finals, or not to finals, but deep into the playoffs. All he did was be a great teammate. He brought in, help with the first big three, the not 5, mm-hmm. not 6, not 7 team, right? But he was sort of still an alpha on that team. That was his team. And it was always his team. I just think Dwayne Wade goes really underappreciated. He's not always out there doing stuff online and was never always out there sort of being in a ton of commercials mm-hmm. or, he just, took advantage of his time and opportunity, made some money, was really, really, really good for a long time.
He's one of those guys who was an icon of his era, but when the era is over, is not as remembered as certain other players. And you can look at any NBA era in history, and there are those guys who are like, you talk to the players, you talk to the fans from that era, and they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, let's talk about Dwayne Wade. And he was a big deal when it was happening. I think to me, the common thread between Wade, Nowitzki, and Parker, and not that Pau Gasol didn't pay his dues, but all three of those guys really had to pay their dues in order to get where they got. Like, Wade did 3 years at Marquette. He was unheralded there. He was a low draft pick. He had to earn that starting lineup spot. He had to really carve out the all-star spots. He did get his titles, and he gets a lot of street cred for the fact that he got one without LeBron. Mm-hmm. Yes, Shaq was there, but it was clearly Wade's team, and it was younger Wade. But he had to really grind to get there and to get to that spot. Nowitzki, coming from Germany as a player who was labeled soft right from the get-go, was traded on draft night, by the Bucks. He was originally supposed to be in Milwaukee, goes to Dallas, has to earn it. But then once he becomes a starter, and even once he becomes an all-star, year after year after year, the Mavericks are like a 4 or a 5 seed, and they're a good team, and they shuffle the deck over and over, but they can't get over the hump. They finally get to the finals. They get their hearts ripped out by Miami, and they got to come back and keep grinding and do it again. Parker, same way. Low draft pick, wasn't even supposed to be a starter in San Antonio, had that unfair reputation as a soft Euro player while that was still a thing, and nearly got traded by the Spurs. Once he became a starter, he was nearly traded so that the Spurs could pick up Jason Kidd, and that fell through. And then Parker's got to come back and re-earn all that trust, and the Spurs have to re-earn his trust, and then he gets those rings and he gets into the Hall of Fame. But he's still, like, we don't talk about Tony Parker as an elite point guard. We're like, oh, he's a really good point guard on some elite teams, and that's why he's in the Hall of Fame. But like, all three of those guys, man, they had to pay their dues big time. And Gasol was maybe a little bit different because he was widely heralded already from Team Spain when he was coming over, and there was never really much of a doubt that Gasol was going to be probably an all-star caliber player. With Wade, Parker, and Nowitzki, you could have made a strong argument that those guys could have washed out of the league in 5-6 years.
Yeah. And I think all of them will probably make the Hall of Fame unless some people are not receiving their ballots on time for whatever reason. All right, Joel, the rest of the season is almost upon us, and we say goodbye to a wonderful episode. Not the Bruce Bowen episode.
The Claw, Mr. Fun Guy.
Not the first row.
We will talk about Kevin Love buyout. We'll talk about Russell Westbrook and where he's going to land because he's going to go somewhere. We got to mention at some point that Terrence Ross got onto the Suns and left the Magic. I didn't even know that happened until the other day. I was flipping through Ross, just like, wait, what? And then had to go chase down that story. So there are some interesting veterans now on different teams. We can save that for next week when the second half of the season resumes and we look at the stretch run to the playoffs.
Statistically speaking, the exact second half next season, because the NBA does find itself with like a month and a half off in between halves of the season. Fairly earned because they are such warriors. Such warriors. Joel, that's going to do it for us. Just say goodbye to the good people.
Goodbye, good people. Find us on YouTube for the video version. Like, share, subscribe there. If you want audio only, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, all that good stuff. We'll see you.